Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Friday Ramblings. I am your host with the most, the perpetually bardic one. I am David, and we're going to sit there. I know we've had a May full of comic book talk. You know, as I said when we did the George Perez episode, that episode wasn't planned, but his passing was something that, could not go without being talked about. So that kind of threw things off a little bit. But we are going to wrap up the month of May without talking about comic books, because we do try to cover all forms of entertainment here on the Friday Ramblings. We're going to go behind the scenes a little bit, and we're going to talk about a man who, simply put, has done a ton for a generation or two worth of children, and in fact is still doing it. Man who has been in the video game business since the beginnings of the video game business. That's right, we are talking about Nolan Bushnell. And it's not just the video game business, we're going to touch on that too. So, let's describe to you exactly who Nolan Bushnell is. Nolan Bushnell was born February 5th, 1943, and is a businessman and electrical engineer. He has founded many companies, some of which we'll give you a quick rundown of, because as always, we do want to give you just enough to feel you got a solid knowledge base for your own future research and knowledge seeking, because learning is fun. And Mr. Bushnell certainly agreed with that. As I said, he was an electrical engineer. He enrolled at Utah State University in 1961, studied electrical engineering and later business. He's graduated after transferring to the University of Utah College of Engineering with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and was one of many computer science students of the 1960s. He married his first wife, Paula Nielsen, in 1966 and had two daughters before, in 1969, they moved to California. He and Paula did divorce in 1975, and by the end of 1977, he married Nancy Nino, with whom he had 6 children. Although he is a Latter-day Saint or Mormon in his youth, by the time of his first divorce, he had foregone the teachings, often being called a lapsed Mormon. Bushnell said that he stopped practicing the faith after he got in a debate over the interpretation of the Bible with a professor at University of Utah's Institute of Religion during college. So there is a quick rundown of his personal life, but it's his business life we are more interested in, so let's get to the nitty-gritty and the fun stuff. Bushnell had worked at Lagoon Amusement Park for many years while attending college. He was made manager of the games department 2 seasons after starting. While working there, he became familiar with arcade's electromechanical games, such as the racing game Speedway, watching customers play and helping to maintain the machinery while learning how they worked, developing his understanding of how the game business operates. He was also interested in the Midway arcade games, where theme park customers would have to use skill and luck to ultimately achieve the goal and win the prize. He liked the concept of people getting curious about the game, and from there getting them to pay the fee in order to play. This is an important note that would influence a lot of his philosophies towards game hardware and software in the future. The idea of curiosity mixed with some level of skill and coordination, leading to people having fun playing the game. After graduating, Bushnell moved to California from Utah with the hopes of being hired by Disney, but the company was not in the routine practice of hiring fresh college graduates. Instead, Bushnell got a job as an electrical engineer with Ampex. At Ampex, he met fellow employee Ted Dabney, and found they had common interests. Bushnell shared his ideas of creating pizza parlors filled with electronics games with Dabney, and Dabney took Dabney to the computing labs at Stanford Artificial Intelligence Laboratory to show him the game Space War. In 1969, Dabney and Bushnell formed SysG with the intention of producing a Space War clone known as Computer Space. Dabney built the prototype and Bushnell shopped it around looking for a manufacturer. They made an agreement with Nutting Associates, a maker of coin-op trivia and shooting games that produced fiberglass cabinets that included a coin slot mechanism. Computer Space was a commercial failure, though its sales exceeded $3 million. Bushnell felt that Nutting Associates had not marketed the game well and decided that his next game would be licensed to a bigger manufacturer. Bushnell also knew that the next game they developed would need to be simpler and not require users to read instructions on the cabinet, since their target audience would likely be drunken bar patrons. Again, keep this concept in mind. He felt that one of the failures was a requirement to read various instructions before you could even attempt to understand how to play the game. So in 1972, Bushnell and Dabney, learning that the name SysG was in use, decided to set off on their own, stating that the base word itself was used by a candle company and a roofing company. They instead decided to incorporate their new business under the name Atari, a reference to a check-like position in the game Go, which Bushnell has called his favorite game of all time. Setting up Sunnyvale, California, they contracted with Bally Manufacturing to create a driving game and hired their second employee, engineer Alan Alcorn. Bushnell originally wanted to develop a game similar to Chicago Coin Speedway, which at the time was the biggest selling electromechanical game in his arcade. Now, we're not going to go super deep into Atari history from here on out. We've already done videos discussing Atari, and there are many documentaries about Atari as a company. We are focusing primarily on Mr. Nolan Bushnell in this video. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And that is that after trying a couple different games and demonstrating the Magnavox Odyssey, they came upon the game Pong. Pong proved to be very popular, and Atari released a large number of Pong-based arcade video games over the next few years as the mainstay of their young company. After the release of Pong, Bushnell and Dabney had a falling out. Dabney felt he was being pushed to the side by Bushnell, while Bushnell felt Dabney was holding back the company from larger financial success. Bushnell then purchased Dabney's share of Atari for $250,000 in 1973. 1973 money, that is not exactly a small amount, so something to keep in mind. Nowadays, you're like, oh, $250,000 for, half ownership of a company? Well, again, you gotta think $250,000 bought a lot more in 1973. Having financially stabilized the company, along with Pong as well as Tank, Atari entered the consumer electronics market with its home Pong consoles first released in 1975. This is something, again, I want to make clear to more people that are more familiar with modern game consoles. The first era of game consoles were designed to only play one single game, similar to arcade cabinets. The era of switching out cartridges did not come for a few more years. If you'd like to know more about Pong consoles, I do encourage you to look up various other videos discussing the subject. It's not something I'm a super expert on myself. I did come around a little bit later in life, after the single game consoles kind of faded out and were replaced by the cartridge-based systems, most of us affiliate with classic gaming. Now, during this period, former Atari employees Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had approached Bushnell about investing in their home computer system, the Apple I, that was built from borrowed parts from Atari and with technical support from Atari employees. They initially offered the design to Bushnell and Atari, but Bushnell wanted Atari to focus on arcade and home consoles. Later in 1975, Jobs offered Bushnell a chance for 1/3 equity stake in their budding company, Apple Inc., for $50,000. Bushnell's remark in hindsight was that, "I was so smart, I said no. It's kind of fun to think about that when I'm not crying." Yep, that's right, folks, because Jobs and Wozniak got their first break in Atari. They did try to do what was fair and get Bushnell in on Apple as one of the first investors. Bushnell passed. However, he would continue to find a lot of success with Atari and with a little company called Pizza Time Theater, which he established in 1977 as a means for Atari to stock its arcade games. We'll get to Pizza Time Theater in just a moment. Now, as Atari started facing more competition in both arcade and home consoles from 1975 onward, Bushnell recognized the cost of developing both types of systems with only limited shelf life were too high, and directed Atari's engineers towards a programmable home console, which would become known as originally as the Atari Video Computer System, or Atari VCS, and later more iconically known as the Atari 2600, aka the Game Changer. Literally, you could change games, but more importantly, as I said, this was the point that most people think of as the home console industry. Changeable cartridges. Now we're getting into a business that can cement itself as an essential part of American culture, if not around the world culture. Now, technically, before Atari completed its design, the Fairchild Channel F was released in '76, and so it's technically the first home console to use game cartridges. Bushnell, realizing he needed to speed up the Atari VCS's development, sought a buyer. Warner Communications, looking to boost their own falling media properties, agreed to acquire Atari for $28 million, with Bushnell personally receiving $15 million in '76. $15 million in '76 is kind of insane. I mean, that is big boy money. But hey, again, this is the guy that had already created some of the iconic first generation arcade games. Atari was a proven commodity at this point. Warner provided the large investment in Atari VCS that allowed it to be completed early next year, released in September '77. Now, the first years of Atari's home console sales were modest and limited by Atari's own supply. However, when the second wave of games came out in '83, Warner then placed Ray Kazar, former vice president of Burlington Industries, to help with Atari's marketing, and Kazar was able to create successful advertising and marketing, positioning the Atari VCS for larger sales periods at the end of the year. Bushnell was a little concerned that they were producing too many units too fast. However, Kazar's marketing, the popularity of Space Invaders at the arcade, as well as its port on the Atari home consoles, drove sales of the console, and things were great. With his lack of belief in Ray Kazar's plans, both Warner Communications and Bushnell realized he was no longer a good leader from the company, and he was removed as CEO and chairman in '79. Warner did offer Bushnell to stay as a creative consultant, but Bushnell refused. Before leaving, Bushnell negotiated the rights to Pizza Time Theater from Atari for $500,000. Kazar was eventually named as Atari's CEO. This leads us to the next big project, Pizza Time Theater, which would eventually go on to not just be a distribution channel for Atari games, but also serve as a place where, as the name suggested, you could be entertained by animatronics and eat pizza. Wait a minute. Place where you watch animatronic robots, eat pizza, and play arcade games. This is starting to sound familiar. This is starting to sound like something from my generation's childhood. Something that was extremely epic and awesome. Why? I do believe that upon naming the Pizza Time Theater to Chuck E. Cheese, Nolan Bushnell kind of created a second company that defined an entire generation's childhood. That's right, folks. Nolan Bushnell did not just get us the Atari company, which provided us with a variety of arcade games and one of the first major home consoles, but he gave us Chuck E. Cheese. Nolan Bushnell made a lot of really fun stuff for children, because Nolan Bushnell's kind of awesome and a good innovator. Now, it would be noted that eventually in the early 80s, Bushnell would turn over day-to-day food operations of Chuck E. Cheese to newly hired executives as he focused on subsequent company Catalyst Technologies. Catalyst Technologies was a venture capital group that would basically help launch a variety of companies, including Androbot, ETAC, Kuma, and Axlon, creating a variety of products based around home electronics that would spread throughout many consumers' homes. ETAC, founded in 1984, was the first company to digitize maps of the world as part of the first commercial automotive navigation system. These maps ultimately provided the backbone for Google Maps, MapQuest.com, and other navigation systems. So Bushnell founded the company that was a primary investor in the company that created the idea of digital maps and automotive navigation systems. That's pretty freaking cool. But we're not done. In 1996, Bushnell would also become senior consultant to the small game developer Aristo International after it bought Board Inc., where he was chairman. The company would go on to be named PlayNet and TeamNet, providing a line of multiplayer-only arcade machines targeted towards adults, which allowed teams of up to 4 players to compete either locally or remotely via internet, such as Urban Strike, Jungle Strike, and various online sports games. Aristo developed 2 main products that would set the standard for this future of online gaming as a social experience, specifically a touchscreen interface bar-top arcade system that would also provide internet access, phone calls, and online network tournaments, and a digital jukebox capable of storing thousands of songs and downloading new releases. These are innovations that other companies would also pick up on. Fact is, nowadays you go to restaurants that have jukeboxes, that's what they are. They are digital jukeboxes. And again, bar top arcade systems where they're all virtual and all this. It's like this is stuff you can still find now if you go to restaurants that have these kind of services. The base technology, as I said, has been improved by the company since then, but key point of all this is Nolan Bushnell helped innovate these technologies. Bushnell has also founded a few other companies, such as Wink and Brain Rush. Both companies based on interactive gaming and gaming designed to stimulate the brain and help find ways to bridge the gap between education and interactive gaming. Bushnell is a man who believes that, and there's a lot of scientific evidence to back him up on this, if you can convert traditional textbook knowledge into an interactive mini-game format, people will retain the knowledge quicker and more reliably, which in turn means because they're learning one set of lessons quicker, they can learn more lessons in a given, say, academic year, which means better educated people. The best of all, because they're having fun educating them because it's being portrayed in an interactive format, they're not resenting the learning experience either. So they're going to want to continue learning year after year under these kind of formats. That's how you make a better culture, better educating of people. More importantly, if you learn lessons quicker and more reliably, you're not going to have to potentially repeat courses, which also helps because then you're getting your degrees more efficiently. You can see where the snowball effect comes from here. These are things Nolan Bushnell believes in. This is stuff he has innovated with a variety of companies. But he's not quite done yet. Later, Atari S company, Atari SA, which, again, I know, how is this an Atari S company? Long story short, you would have to watch one of my old videos about how the Atari name has been bounced around. The long and short of it is the current company named Atari is not technically the same company that used to be. We'd mentioned Warner Communications bought Atari. Warner Communications would eventually split Atari in a couple different companies. Those companies would themselves be bought out, renamed. Some of them would go out of business. Intellectual properties would be bought by other people. So the modern Atari is not the Atari we all well and know, but out of respect for the Atari history and what the current Ataris would like to continue doing in the gaming industry, they did at one point bring Nolan Bushnell on the board of directors. So good for them. Bushnell's also founded Modal VR, a company that develops a portable large-scale VR system for enterprises to use in training, such as security forces. And Anti-Aging Games LLC, being a co-founder of the company, which features games based on online memory, concentration, and focus games for healthy people over the age of 35. We've already mentioned Brain Rush. Company uses video game technology and educational software. Between 2010 and 2012, Brain Rush ran tests in Spanish language vocabulary learning with over 2,200 teachers and 80,000 students throughout the country, and got an increase in learning speed of between 8 and 10 times traditional learning. Nolan was also appointed CEO and chairman of publicly traded company Global Games Technology Corp. in 2019. There's been various other companies that Bushnell has been appointed to board of directors of or helped start. That's what the guy does. But almost every company is based around technology, specifically technology as it relates to entertainment. He did serve as a judge on the USA Network reality series Made in the USA, and has worked with Screw Attack, a digital media company that is currently owned by Rooster Teeth Productions, that was one of the early, Screw Attack itself was one of the early companies helping produce internet-based video series as. You know, you go back to some of the oldest stuff currently on video services like YouTube, and Screw Attack helped started some of those series. Again, they themselves have been bought out by Rooster Teeth Productions since then, but hey, that happens in business. Happens to the best of us. Bushnell has also been featured in the documentary film Something Ventured about venture capital development, as well as Atari Game Over, a documentary about the unearthing of the Atari video game burial site. So, winding things up, how does the video game industry generally view Nolan Bushnell? Bushnell is, alongside Ralph H. Baer, one of two men to be considered the father of electronic gaming due to Bushnell's contributions in establishing the arcade game market and creation of Atari. Ralph H. Baer, who's credited with creating the first home video game console himself, as we said, is often cited as another potential father of electronic gaming. The general peace treaty of it is that Mr. Baer is recognized as the father of home video gaming, while Bushnell is credited with innovating the arcade game. At the British Academy Video Game Awards on March 10, 2009, the British Academy of Film and Television Arts awarded the Academy Fellowship to Bushnell in recognizing his outstanding achievements as a founding father of the video game industries. Since 2008, there's been interest in a biographical film about Bushnell's life. Currently, Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the men involved in trying to get this film front and center. Now, real quick, what's the wrap-up of all this? Well, as I said, Nolan Bushnell is a gentleman who basically, once he figured out that digital media and video games were something that had a lot of potential, went wholeheartedly into it. He has continued to push the limits of what it can do, not just as an entertainment forum, but an educational platform. Bushnell is in many ways a classic entrepreneur, in that he does not simply start a company, make some money at it, and say, hey, that's good enough. He is constantly looking for new places to go where he can find new avenues of innovation and people with raw potential to bring something new to the world. And he has never been shy about this. Bushnell has done various interviews, especially related to venture capitals and starting up businesses. And what he has found over decades of working as a entrepreneur, CEO, chairman, director of many companies to be keys to success. Now, some of these are a little controversial compared to what other people view as important in business. For instance, Bushnell has been quoted as saying that he is very much against the idea of major companies preferring college graduates and, in fact, requiring college degrees, as he feels that while education is important, colleges also tend to teach, especially when you start getting into things like master's and PhD level, a very narrow field of vision of how to approach business and how to think, which stymies creativity, which in turn stymies true innovation. Bushnell has gone on record as saying that he very early on proclaimed that the Nintendo Wii and the innovative Wiimote was one of the next big things in gaming, that he found that the Wiimote's ability to help people draw themselves into the game and feel themselves doing a variety of motions despite having only one controller was the great power of the platform. The fact that that same idea would continue to go on in various forms. Nintendo's next two consoles, the Wii U and the Switch being a landmark successful console, has shown that he had a little bit of a good idea there. But as I said, Bushnell's major quotes is about finding creativity. One of his quotes is that you should hire for passion and intensity, that everything else can be trained later. As well as stating that he feels people should not just continue to be hired out of the same pool of people that are trained academically, and that we should view academic success as the major positive contributor, pointing out that at various companies of his, including Chuck E. Cheese and Atari, some of his most important employees who created the innovations that produced the most successes were not only not college graduates, but one in particular whose ideas did a lot to help build up the company Chuck E. Cheese and some of its unique ways of presenting the live entertainment, was a gentleman who had served time in jail in lieu of going to college. That college tends to be an atmosphere that stymies artists. Now, don't get him wrong. Again, he does believe in education. Obviously, you need people that are hard money people in a company. But when it comes to hiring innovators, you do want free thinkers. He has also gone on record as saying that he does not believe in violent and gory video games. He does not invest in companies that create those. One of the things he has stated about the video game industry and how it has changed is that his quote was that there was a point in time in the 80s in which video games started getting gory and violent. And that when they got gory and violent, you lost a lot of the female gamers. And when the females quit playing games, they quit developing games. And when they quit developing games, you started getting games that weren't developed from a female perspective, which, again, narrowed the focus of what was being done with video games. Because now you had basically masculine, macho, violent thinking people becoming a much bigger percentage of the video game industry, and the games reflected that. Now again, considering what we have now, where there's a big thing over the last decade or so about not having women in high positions of game development in a lot of companies, and you can look back in history and see that when he was running Atari, he had several females in influential positions in the company. You can see where his theory came from, and you can see it's not completely without justification. Now, again, I'm not saying he's 100% right on anything, but these are his philosophies, and they are interesting to ponder. But I don't want to pontificate too much. As I said, there are many fabulous interviews and documentaries where you can hear these things from Mr. Bushnell himself. What I want to do here today is give you that behind-the-scenes look, of a gentleman who, no matter how old he gets, continues to believe in working hard, looking for something that nobody else is doing, and wanting to find what comes next. Because of that, Nolan Bushnell, for those of us in my age group, as I said, between Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, covers a large chunk of my childhood. We salute you. We salute the fact you've continued to be an influence, even if it's just on a investor's level, to the video game industry in the 90s, the 2000s, and the teens. Hey, it's 2022. Mr. Bushnell's still with us. Maybe he wants to invest in something else. Maybe he'd like to invest in Roulette Productions. I certainly would be willing to throw out some video game ideas. Make a few pitches. Maybe he's interested. I don't know. Honestly, I'd love to just shake his hand. Socially. I'll buy him a coffee, bottle of water, whatever he wants. Buy him a sandwich. We can do it. I'd be honored to. Still, remember folks, here at Roulette Productions, we love all kinds of entertainment, but we do try to keep things positive. And when it's all said and done, the lesson here is, it's not just about the product, but about the people behind it. Nolan Bushnell's been behind a lot. Our buddy from a couple weeks ago, George Perez, he was behind a lot too. So, when it's all said and done, you can't have product without artists. You can't have artists without people behind them believing in them. So, if you got a relative or a close friend who's a dreamer, who's strumming away at his guitar, who's sitting at her canvas, trying to paint something that's just totally encompasses her soul, hey, give them all the support you got, because you never know what's going to hit big. And you never know what we're going to talk about next week on the Ramblings. So, whether you're Mr. Bushnell or not, go ahead and join us. Like, comment, and subscribe, because in June we are going to hit up a variety of new topics. I'm going to introduce a new meta topic that's going to lead to some spin-off episodes. We're going to continue our mega topic of the Justice Society and how their legacy perpetuates throughout the decades with various DC heroes. Good times. Going to finish that up. We'll talk about games. We'll talk about wrestling. We'll talk about comics. We'll talk about movies. We'll talk about TV shows. Throw us some suggestions, because, hey, if it's entertainment, it's entertaining, so it's worth talking about. Till then, you got my love and support for whatever you do. Just don't be haters. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. See you in 7.